Which I'm sure everybody knows, Paula Chrysler, our Director of Community Engagement.
Everybody smile.
In the back of the room, we have Brianna Davis, another longtime volunteer with Healthy Savannah and has run the Visibility Committee for a number of years and co-chairs it with me this year. And then also our presenter and another volunteer and consultant with Healthy Savannah, Whitney Shepherd, who focuses not only in the advocacy area for Healthy Savannah, but also is involved in a lot of the grant activity that Healthy Savannah does as well. So I know we're going to learn a lot of really interesting things today, and want to make it a really interactive session. And I'll just turn it over to Whitney at this point. She can tell you a little bit about herself and what we're going to be doing today. Just kind of like housekeeping kind of details, there are restrooms down the hall on the right if anybody needs that. And if you need to get up to get some more food, the delicious food in the back, do feel comfortable doing that as we're talking, okay? And I'll turn it over to Whitney.
Thank you, Patty. Well, good morning, everyone. I think it's still morning. As Patty mentioned, my name is Whitney Shepherd. I have been volunteering with Healthy Savannah since late 2012. When Paula and I happened to share a space where our offices were kind of next to each other. And she knew I was a transportation engineer. So she started asking me questions about this project she was managing around our Title I schools and about infrastructure, because that's my wheelhouse, for kids to bike and walk to school safely. So lucky for me, I had just started my company, and I didn't have a whole heck of a lot to do. So I was able to start volunteering for Healthy Savannah, making maps of infrastructure, developing statistics for each of the schools we were focusing on. And that was the beginning of my work with Healthy Savannah. Now I do a range of things for them, still around active living, but also healthy eating. And I'm a policy consultant for Healthy Savannah. All while working, Transport Studio is my company, all while working as a consultant still to primarily local governments. So I'm going to talk a lot today, and bear with me, but I do want you to interrupt if you have questions. And before I spend a lot of time talking, I wanted to just first get feedback from y'all about what a healthy neighborhood means to you, or what a healthy environment means to you. Because all of our policy work is an attempt to drive systematic change that will create a healthy environment for all in Chatham County. So before we dig in, I'll get some feedback from you. And then talk about how some of the work we've already done, that we have ongoing, is creating a healthier environment already today. And then what our campaigns are right now that are ongoing that you might be interested in working in, and how we can work together, what resources we have to offer you as volunteers, because we certainly hope that this is your beginning, that this is your first step in becoming a dedicated volunteer and getting more engaged in our policy work. Okay, so that's to remind me that we have 10 minutes, so we don't have a lot of time. But think about where you live, or where you work or go to school. What is one thing in that neighborhood that makes it a healthy neighborhood? And then what might one thing be that would make it healthier, or that would make the healthy choice an easy choice in that neighborhood? I'm going to start at the back of the room. I'm going to pick on you guys. Yeah.
Okay. That's sort of an easy thing for me. One thing our neighborhood has is we have very nice wide streets. Mm-hmm. So they're wide enough that it's very easy for people to walk and run and do that kind of thing and interact. So that's one of my favorite things about our neighborhood. On the outside of our neighborhood, the cities install sidewalks, but that's even made a better running path and things for those people who are active that way. And the one thing that I think our neighborhood should have that it doesn't really have is something for the younger children. It has a small playground at a marina near us, but it's very small. Okay. There's something actually in the neighborhood. I'd love to see that where the kids could be more active.
Good. Who else? Okay. Okay.
Where I live, right around the corner, I live right by Heritage Organic Farms, so it's super easy to go get a farm box, which is wonderful. I'm out in the South Effingham area. And then, kind of to go off her as well, we don't really have any good playgrounds out around there. Or really any good parks to go walk with the family.
Okay. No, that's good. That's good thinking about how infrastructure, sidewalks and streets can make it easier to get activity, but then also how you need a destination. You need a park or a playground or something like that. How about this table? Think on you guys. What one thing makes your neighborhood healthy or not?
So it's kind of like what she said, we have like really wide streets and it's kind of empty right now. So it's not going to people like run. Even in my neighborhood, we see a lot of people running and walking their dogs and walking around. It could have a better playground because right now it's like deep in the woods and now to go down there and play on the playground because all the spider webs and the bugs. So I mean they can have more stuff for the kids like a basketball court, a tennis court, stuff like that.
Okay. So more facilities for active recreation.
Right.
Good. You guys looked ready when I pointed at you.
That's like pretty much the same exact thing. Like in my neighborhood, we have paths for you to go running and walking. It's like a gated community though, but it's kind of funny because they have 2 dog parks, but they don't have any like kids parks or anything like that for the kids to do at all. Not just the pool. They have a pool, but other than that, that's it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How about the 7 room?
Well, around where I stay there, like 2 playgrounds or things like that. Not the proper district, but my issue, the bad thing is our streets are kind of narrow. So you can't really, you don't have, if you want to walk, it's not easy because of the cars and so.
Yeah.
And then if you do walk, you might have tightness, so that's the only issue, the streets are too narrow around my neighborhood. And there's a lot of parking, like I have driveway, but everyone don't have a driveway. So everybody else is parked, and it's hard to get, walk up and down.
So, not surprisingly, a lot of you all are talking about physical activity and what the streets look like in your neighborhood. I think when we talk about healthy environments, often that's at the top of a lot of people's minds because it's so obvious. And today we're going to dig in a little more. You mentioned the farm near you and how you can get a farm box. We're also going to talk about access to healthy food and what kind of issues we face in our community related to that. I loved that a lot of you went straight to children and thinking about, can children get enough exercise? Are they safe? Are they comfortable? Can they play? Because that is so important. Because we know that how people grow up impacts the decisions they're going to make in the rest of their life. We all learn habits about how we eat or play or relax when we were kids that we carry forward. So that's great. Thank you for that. So, all of you have a reason that you decided to work with Healthy Savannah and get more engaged. I hope that the lunch helped a little bit, but I don't think that's the only reason you're here. So, what I'd like to do is just spend a little bit of time just giving you some data about the need for Healthy Savannah, why we think that it's important for us to come together as a coalition. And I guess I should take a step back. You all obviously have been participating in some way with Healthy Savannah, but how many of you feel like you could explain what Healthy Savannah is? Just a show of hands. Ah, okay. So big picture, Healthy Savannah is a coalition. And we have more than 100 members, public agency members, private businesses, other nonprofits and stakeholders, residents, business owners. And what's powerful about that coalition is that we can call attention to and raise up the work that all of our various members are doing, and also hopefully impact each other and encourage each other to do better work in terms of making the healthy choice the easy choice. Something that's very unique about Healthy Savannah is that when you think about a lot of other advocacy organizations or nonprofits, they do a lot of programming. They might go into a school and teach a cooking class or teach a yoga class. Healthy Savannah is unique because we focus on policy work, not programs. So sometimes it might seem like there's not a whole lot going on because it's all happening through conversations and connections and trying to impact policy change. And since we're here today to talk primarily about policy, I will warn you that you have to be patient if you want to change policy. But that it's one of the best ways to make sustainable change and make our environment healthier over time. So, why we're focused on that. In Chatham County today, 1 in 4 of our children reports that they don't have a reliable source of affordable, healthy food. 1 in 4 children can't get healthy food in their own neighborhood. And at the same time, 1 in 3 children is overweight or obese. And probably intuitively you know that an overweight or obese child is much more likely to be an obese adult and then suffer from the health impacts of that, whether it be diabetes or cardiovascular disease or any of the other things that come along with it. What's particularly tragic for me about that is that means we're overfeeding our children. We're overfeeding them, but we're undernourishing them. And what we know is that there are probably some environmental reasons impacting that, making it difficult for kids to eat well and maintain a healthy weight. So this graphic shows where our food deserts are. A food desert is an underserved neighborhood. It's a neighborhood that is low income, where households are much less likely to own vehicles, or if they do own one vehicle, that vehicle is probably at work all day long with the main worker. So they're mobility limited, and they also don't have a grocery store or other store that offers lean meats, dairy, grains, fresh fruits and vegetables within a mile of their house. So they have a difficult time. The environment is working against them when they're trying to make a healthy choice. And what we know is that in all those purple areas in Savannah, 35,000 people are living. That's about 1 in 4 people in Savannah. So we can make a lot of impact if we can promote policy change that'll change that and bring healthy food into these neighborhoods.
Excuse me, can I
Yes,
ask you to do something for us?
Yeah,
I'm not good at math.
sure.
Tell us where those purple areas are.
So, I can't point on that because it's it doesn't read my LED. So you see I-16 coming in here? This is the landmark district. That donut hole in the middle is the landmark district in like Ardsley Park, Chatham Crescent. So you've got some areas on the east side. This is Hunter Army Airfield, all this hashed area. And so you've got South Side and West Savannah and a little bit on East Savannah. And this is Victory Drive or US 80 right here. And then Truman. This is the Truman. Thank you for asking that. Yeah. What this means is that we have a lot of health disparities in Chatham County. And in fact, if you're Black in Chatham County, your chance of dying from diabetes is more than 3 times as likely as if you're white in this county. And that's a disparity that we can change through policy change, and we're going to talk about that.
Question?
Yeah.
Can you repeat that statistic again?
If you're Black in Chatham County, your chance of dying from diabetes is more than 3 times higher than if you're white.
Thank you.
Sure. The reason policy change can impact that is that people's choices depend upon the options available to them. And through policy change, we can create more healthy options in our county. And ultimately, our goal is to overcome those disparities and achieve health equity so that everyone can make a healthy choice. There are a bunch of seats right up here. And if you haven't heard the term health equity before, this is a somewhat nice definition, although it runs a little long. But again, health equity means that everyone has the opportunity to make the healthy choice, no matter where they live, work, or play. And I wanted to spend a little time just giving you an example of an early success story for Healthy Savannah as we began our work in policy. One of the first projects that Healthy Savannah partnered with the city on was the smoke-free air ordinance, which was called Breathe Easy. And that ordinance limits smoking in public places. That passed a little over let's see, it passed in 2007, I believe, 2006?
10 implemented January 1st, 2011.
Okay, so since 2011, that ordinance passed. And what we've seen now is that air quality in public places, in bars and restaurants, is significantly better. So especially thinking about the employees who are there all day long, their exposure to smoke and particulate matter and formaldehyde has reduced greatly. But also we've seen across the county that rates of cardiovascular disease have dropped significantly. So that policy change directly impacted our air quality, and now people are healthier because they're breathing cleaner air. Today, Healthy Savannah is mostly focused on campaigns to promote healthy eating and active living. So what that looks like in terms of a healthier environment are some of the things you all mentioned. Access to healthy food, whether it's through being close to a farm that offers a farm box, or a neighborhood grocery store, or a big grocery store that, if you're lucky, you can drive to. Access to physical activity, like the parks and playgrounds you all mentioned, or streets where you feel safe getting activity. And then, in a more systematic way, a thriving neighborhood that has services that residents need, things like grocery stores, but also pharmacies and cafes where they can create community and share with their neighbors. And then again, ultimately, health equity, so that we're encouraging public investment where people need it the most to promote health equity. So, as we're engaging in policy change, the more people we have helping, the better. And I hope you're here today because you're interested in being an advocate and volunteering and digging in. The first thing I want you to know is that your voice matters. How many of you live in the city of Savannah? Okay, good, good. How about Chatham County? Well, if you live in Savannah, you live in Chatham. How many of you are parents? Yeah. So as a constituent, if you live here, you're a constituent, and as a parent, you clearly have an important voice. But also, just as someone who sees a need, you have an important voice. And I can guarantee you that decision makers in this town listen when their constituents talk. So your voice very much matters. And it not only matters as we're trying to impact change, talking directly to an elected official or some other decision maker, but it matters to Healthy Savannah as a coalition because you all represent residents in the neighborhoods that we're trying to impact. And your life experience can help us make policies that are more effective and that address the actual needs on the ground. So we wanted to talk a little bit about different levels of engagement and how you could dip your toe in or go all in if you want to. So the first important thing is that your voice matters not only to elected officials, but also to your network. No matter who you are, you have family, friends, coworkers, people that you go to church with. And every time you talk to those people, it's an opportunity to talk about whether or not we can make healthy choices. Can you find healthy food in your neighborhood, or all you have are corner stores that sell lottery tickets and beer and cigarettes? Do you feel comfortable letting your kids play on the street or not? And then that's the beginning of a conversation about how policy can shape that. The other thing that's important is that you all have a story. You all have a story about whether you can make the healthy choice or not. And that story is important because we know, as human beings, the most important tool that we have to change our minds is empathy. And I can tell you facts and figures about 35,000 people living in food deserts in Savannah. But it's far more compelling for me to be able to tell you a story about my friend Karen, who has to take a 30-minute bus ride and walk along MLK to and from the bus stop to get to Kroger, and that it takes her so long in the summer to get back home to the grocery store that when she tries to buy frozen fruits and vegetables, they're all melted by the time she gets home. And that even though she wants to make the healthy choice, it's difficult for her. And even better would be for me to say, Karen's happy to walk because she knows it keeps her healthy, but she's also retired, and she's mostly worried about the single moms that live in her neighborhood. We're not only carrying bags of groceries in the heat and wrangling, but they're also wrangling kids walking along MLK, which is a busy street, trying to get to that bus stop. And again, we can change that for them through policy change and incentivizing grocery stores in these neighborhoods and other sources of fresh fruits and vegetables. And then the last thing is being an advocate and actually volunteering at the grassroots level for Healthy Savannah, whether that means attending community events and collecting stories from other people or engaging with them to provide information and education about policy and about healthy choices. It can be something as simple as collecting surveys or taking a survey yourself. And then finally the big one, which might make you a little more nervous, is contacting decision makers and actually making that call and asking for their support. So, if you want to make a difference, there are a number of ways to engage with Healthy Savannah to do that. And the good news is that we have a lot of resources to help you. We've been very fortunate that some of our funders provide technical assistance and best practices, not only in terms of the policies that we're advocating for, but also in how to be a good advocate and how to be effective in your ask of decision makers. And ultimately, our goal, again, is to create a culture of health in Chatham County. And that means access to healthy food and active living, but also healthy neighborhoods and healthy housing so that we can achieve equity.
I have a question about the choice of healthy food.
Yes.
I mean, how can you help implement better, let's say, grocery store closer to the neighbors where it's hard to get in, and how can you help that? Because that's private investment.
Right.
So how can you help? Like, okay, there is this area.
It's a great question, and I'm going to put a pause on it because I'm going to get there. And then you can, if I don't do a good job explaining it, then you have to tell me that you didn't get enough info. And in fact, one of the policy areas that we're working on is called healthy food financing, which is a public-private partnership that can help incentivize small business owners and even large business owners, large grocery stores, to come into communities and bring healthy food where there isn't any today. And I'll get into more detail on all of these in the next several slides. We're also working on complete streets. A complete street is just a street that is safe and comfortable for anyone. A person in a car, a person in a truck, a person on a bus, in a wheelchair, on foot, or on a bike. A complete street accommodates all of those people. Also thinking about that access to physical activity, safe routes to school, where our schools are located, whether or not there are sidewalks and bike lanes to get there, whether or not neighborhoods all have equal access to parks and open space, have some place to play safely. And digging in a little more to land use regulations, our zoning, and our comprehensive planning to make sure that as our community develops and redevelops, the form that it takes promotes active living and healthy living. And lastly, always keeping an eye on equity. So those policies that help people that need it the most and then that benefit everyone in turn. So the food access question. A healthy food finance initiative really is an incentive package that's offered by a public agency. We're working with the city right now to design one in their Office of Business Opportunity. And healthy food finance incentives have been shown to work really across the country, and they vary depending on what community you're in. Philadelphia started healthy food finance many years ago and has a fantastic citywide program that President Obama recognized and used as a national model so that now there's a federal program for healthy food finance to build new grocery stores in partnership with private business, to renovate existing corner stores and add things like refrigeration for fresh fruits and vegetables, to do simple changes like make the lighting better, pull the healthy food toward the front of the store to replace the candy bars and cigarettes that were there before, so that when people walk in, that's the obvious choice. And other incentives that can be offered are things like expedited permitting, help in business planning, reduced fees, even things like additional security offered by the police force or infrastructure investments on site that the public agency can make. And what we're working on right now is a combination of low-interest loans for businesses that might want to bring healthy food into our underserved areas, as well as grants, so that the public sector, because it recognizes a public benefit from increased access to healthy food, is willing to invest with these private business owners. So that's one way. Also, creating those thriving neighborhoods that I mentioned before, making sure that neighborhood services like small grocery stores, but also pharmacies, parks are neighborhood services, that they're accessible to all of us that live within the city or the county. Promoting housing choice, mixed use, which I'll get into a little more, and finally a walkable and safe connected street network. And the overriding theme of all of this is creating neighborhoods that are walkable, that are affordable, and that are stable. So that as our neighborhoods redevelop and improve, people that live there today aren't pushed out, but instead can stay in place and benefit from the improved services. So part of that is that we're advocating for mixed-use zoning. And I know in your day-to-day lives you may not think about zoning very often unless you're a business owner and have tried to build a building or renovate a building. But zoning is the set of land use regulations that tells us what we can build on any given site. It tells us where the building can be placed, how much parking we have to provide, whether we have to provide parking, whether we need certain fences or trees. In some places in Savannah, it's what your roof can look like. So all of this really shapes the character of our community over time because it determines what can be built in our neighborhoods. And we're advocating for mixed use because mixed use developments, really it's all about bringing point A closer to point B. If you live within a short distance of a grocery store, it means a dad can run out for a gallon of milk and be back. It means a child can bike or walk to school because that school is close to where they live. It means that as my mama gets older and stops driving, she can walk to the hair salon and get her hair cut. It's also important to allow mixed use because it can add jobs to an area and support economic vitality of a neighborhood. What goes hand in hand with mixing uses is housing density. Density is important because if you think about in-town neighborhoods in Savannah that have been stable and thriving over time, like Ardsley Park, for example, it's primarily a single-family neighborhood, but it allows things like garage apartments and carriage houses and quadruplexes and duplexes so that there's a mix of income in that neighborhood so that a grandmother can decide to stay in the same neighborhood and live in a carriage house and be near her children and grandchildren, and that she benefits from the services that are attracted by that dual income household. So she doesn't get pushed out into an isolated apartment complex that might be more affordable. So density promotes affordability and housing choice, which in turn allows healthier choices. Did you have a question?
I do. What is DUA?
DUA is dwelling units per acre.
Okay, thank you.
Basically the number of households on an acre of land. And as I mentioned, we, as Healthy Savannah, as a policy advocate, one of the things that we do is research best practices. And the best practice for a walkable community is a minimum of 22 dwelling units an acre. And we know today that only one neighborhood in Savannah achieves that density. And it's the Landmark Historic District. So the tourists are great. They have a nice walkable neighborhood to visit. It's the rest of us that need a little more density. And I want to make a very important point here. Not all density is the same, and not all more dense housing is appropriate for every community. But it's important because not only does it encourage housing choice and affordability, but it also creates a market for the services that we're talking about. Neighborhoods that don't have grocery stores today can't maintain a grocery store because they don't have enough households to create a market for that store. So where we have our food deserts today, we need to promote more dense development so that they can support the store that they want. So this goes hand in hand with the Healthy Food Finance Initiative that we're working on. I mentioned not all density is the same. This is an architect's rendering of a neighborhood that's 40 dwelling units an acre, so it's almost twice what you need to have a walkable community. I think that looks pretty good. It's 2 stories high. Sure, there aren't huge suburban yards, but it's very walkable. There's green space. And I want to, when I talk about density, I want to be especially careful to say this is not necessarily what I mean. Stillwell Towers is 74 dwelling units an acre in its census block. And it may be appropriate for that to exist near our hospital in town, but it's not appropriate for all of our neighborhoods, right? And you can achieve density without doing something like that high-rise building. This is an example of a block on Park Avenue that achieves 29 dwelling units an acre. And this is an example of Barnard Street that gets up to 24 dwelling units an acre. These good in-town neighborhoods that Savannah's known for that are walkable already. The other piece of our policy campaign really does relate a lot to physical activity and safe physical activity through complete streets. So again, whether you're a person on foot, on a bike, on a bus, in a car, that street is safe and comfortable for you. And the zoning changes, the policy side of that impacts that are things like block size, whether or not developers provide bus stops and other amenities, the building placement. A building closer to the street is much more friendly for a pedestrian because then they have something to look at and it probably shades their sidewalk. Where we do have parking lots, pedestrian connections through those parking lots so that if you're on the bus and you get off the bus on the street, walking through the parking lot is safer for you. And also thinking about trails, like the Truman Trail specifically that Healthy Savannah has been advocating for some time. So an off-street network for things like multi-use paths and trails. Interconnected streets are important because, one, they're more efficient for incident response. It's easier for our first responders to get to us if they have alternate routes. 2, it creates better air quality because traffic is dispersed across an interconnected network, and so there's less congestion. And 3, it's easier to walk. It means you can take shorter trips. You're not isolated to just one main road if you're trying to get somewhere. And in the end, all of these policies together, all of these zoning regulations that we're advocating for, will over time shape our development patterns so that we'll have more thriving communities. So that we'll have mixed-use neighborhoods that can support a grocery store. And we can start to put a dent in those 35,000 people, that statistic. Diverse housing types support diverse lifestyles. We know that as a population, we're getting older. The baby boomers are starting to retire. And they overwhelmingly want to stay in the neighborhoods where they're comfortable, where they've lived all of their lives. So we as a community need to help build neighborhoods where they can age, where they can grow older, where they might not be able to drive as much, but they can still get their basic daily needs met. And it really does all come down to access. Can you access the healthy choices that you need to be your most healthy? So, now that you all are experts on policies that promote healthy eating and active living, what can we provide you to advocate for these things with us in partnership with us? The first thing is, because we've been doing this a little while and because we are connected to people who are much smarter than we are, we have messages that have been tested, that work, that can help convince a decision maker to do things like invest in a healthy food finance incentive program, or even to support something like a mobile farmers market or another program. We have specific materials, and I have a few that y'all can pass around. I'm sure I don't have one for everyone, but we have one-pagers so that if you have someone who's interested in something like healthy food access, you can share information with them. And on all of our materials, there's at least some call to action, some ask of reaching out to city council or others. And we have something similar for the land use changes I was talking about. This one's not quite a one-pager because it's very complicated. But if you're interested in that, it's a two-pager. We've also got on the Healthy Savannah website a lot of data and information about the work that we're doing that we hope that you'll partner with us on. And a lot of local data so that we can all understand what the need really is. So statistics like 1 in 4 children doesn't have access to healthy food, but 1 in 3 is obese or overweight. That's important for us to know so that we can focus our energy where we need to focus it to make change. I don't expect you to read all of what you've got in front of you, but I wanted you to have a sense of what's available for you.
2 extra? I only put one per table.
There you go. That's good. That's good. If you are in a situation where you want lots of handouts, all you have to do is let us know and we'll get them to you. But I did want to highlight some of the messages that work. Because I know when I started doing this, I mean, I'm a transportation engineer, y'all. Like, when I talk about streets, I get into engineering speak a lot of the time, and people just give me the blank stare. So having these messages has really helped me as I talk to residents and parents and decision makers about why streets built to share matter. So this is just an example of some of the messages we are talking about, safe places to bike and walk. What resonates with people across the political spectrum and across urban and rural communities. Complete streets improve everyone's health because they make it easier and safer to be active. And complete streets are proven to increase physical activity. Neighborhoods that have complete streets are more active than neighborhoods that don't. And complete streets make the road network safer for everyone, whether you're in a car or not. I wanted to just show a quick example. This is on the Healthy Savannah website. Lots of information for you, lots of messaging that complements the handout you have. So if you want to know more after today, healthysavannah.org is a great place to start. And on the website, there are materials like, you could just use that graphic as a handout if you're talking to someone about complete streets or streets built to share. The other example I wanted to go back to is healthy food financing, and these are messages, talking points that have been tested across the country. What's great about healthy food financing is that it does increase access to healthy food. It's been shown to be impactful in reducing food deserts. And we know that when people have access to healthy food, they are healthier. They do make healthier choices because people's choices do depend on the options available to them. The other added bonus is that healthy food finance directly promotes business in our neighborhoods, primarily small businesses. And that those businesses can become anchors for more commercial development and create more tax revenue in a community. And this is just a screenshot of the handout that many of you have to show how we use some of those messages and leave behinds that we take to different organizations that we talk to. So, we've got the website that I hope you'll all go visit. We have resources and messaging to help you. And the way that we can all work together and use those resources is for you all to volunteer with us. The starting point is just to visit the website and get more information and give us feedback. My email address is policy@healthysavannah.org. If there's something you're very interested in, whether it's safe routes to school or more parks, safer places to play, safer streets, healthy food access, you can shoot me an email. And then don't just email me, email your decision makers. And if you're uncomfortable emailing your decision makers, we can help with that too. And the thing I wanted to go back to is that your story is so important in all of this. We need your story. Our decision makers need your story. They need to understand what it's like to live in your neighborhoods, what it's like for people who live in one of those food deserts to try to get healthy food, and that helps promote change. Also, that your network matters, and talking to the people that you work with, that you go to church with in your family, and promoting a healthy choice at every opportunity. I spoke to a group of medical students not long ago, and they were having lunch, and there was a case of Coke in the back. And the first thing I said was, "What are y'all doing with a case of sugary drinks?" It's important just to recognize things that you see that are counter to a healthy choice. And they to their credit, said that Coca-Cola is one of their main sponsors, and so they donated the cans of Coke. But they, sometimes you don't see what's happening in your own life unless someone holds a mirror up to you, and it's important to do that as an advocate. With that, I'd love to open it up to questions. I think I'm okay on time. Oh, I'm so good. I'm 3 minutes ahead of schedule. Yes.
One more thing. I almost forgot. Tell them that Coca-Cola has water. They have the Sonic.
Yeah.
They have the Sonic. They got Smart Water. They got water.
And they're doing that because they recognize that the market is changing, and because advocates have been fighting to reduce sugary drinks, especially in schools and in parks and things like that. Which is it's not a campaign we've spearheaded yet, but maybe that's what we'll do next.
But when organizations solicit or accept Coca-Cola's what is it? Sponsorship. They should ask for what they want. I want the Sonic. I want Smart Water.
I agree. Yes,
I
ma'am.
have a question. So, the food deserts,
Yes.
is that an urban term? Because in the rural areas, it's a given that things are going to be more than a mile away. So what's the terminology to describe what goes on in the rural areas?
So the USDA is probably the most active organization in terms of defining a food desert. And of course, they recognize that mobility is different in rural areas. And so they define a food desert in an urban area as a low-income neighborhood that doesn't have access to healthy food within a mile.
Mm-hmm.
But in rural areas, their threshold is 10 miles.
Mm-hmm.
So in recognition of the different development patterns, that's what they say. But they also caveat that because really it depends. You could be in a rural area and be 5 miles from a grocery store, but if you have to walk that 5 miles, you still are experiencing that as a food desert. So it's important to understand the infrastructure available, the mobility options available to get people to and from healthy food. And one of the things we're doing as an example is talking to Kat about how they can provide better transportation, more effective transportation directly to grocery stores from these underserved areas, because that's what's important. It's important to connect where people live to where they can get affordable, healthy food.
So do you think that it would be reasonable to try and get a grant for low-income families to get a rolling cooler? Because when you were telling that story, I was like, if she had a rolling cooler with, those ice packs, that would help a whole lot.
It
Just
could.
a little one that, she could roll behind her and stack all the other groceries on there too. It would just be easier to roll with it.
I think that's a great idea. That's why engaging with people who are experiencing the problem is so important, because then we would know if that would work.
The packaging that you use when you buy groceries also affects how things go. If you use plastic, everything is gonna melt. If you use brown bags, which are a healthy alternative, they tend to stay frozen for a while. I used to live in New York, and we had those carriage things that you roll, and I noticed every time I opted for plastic bags, it was a mess. But if I took paper bags, I was good. So we might encourage also paper bags as an alternative to plastic bags.
Thank you for that.
And I had a question about the rural. I'm not sure what's rural in the US. I wasn't raised here, but shouldn't people in the rural areas have more land as opposed to the ones in the urban areas? In that a lot of things to be healthy, they can make them themselves, like plant your own vegetables and raise your own chickens and make oats for your cheese.
My neighborhood is a prime example. I'm in the middle of nowhere, and by Heritage Farms, by the way.
Okay.
And no, because I can't necessarily access the farm for a lot of different reasons. But a lot of people where I live there because they don't want to live in the city.
Yeah.
It's not because they want to grow anything or raise anything. It's because that's just for other reasons. That's where they choose to live. So there is a lot of land, and I pass a lot of land that has food on it, but I can't access it until I go to the grocery store and purchase it. So it's not really the same as walking by and there's a lot of fruit trees that may fall or hang over the fence, and so you can knock it down, or it's not the same. And that's why I was asking, because I know where I live. Even the 10-mile, I'm still in a food desert. Well, maybe if I go the other way to Food Lion, maybe not. but that's still a significant trip.
It takes a lot of planning.
Yes, it's a significant trip. And so, and I was also wondering, if you live in a neighborhood that is middle class or above, but you still have to do a lot of driving, do they even, because it sounds to me like economic status is attached to or run parallel to mileage when it comes to whether or not you're in a food desert. So if I'm in a middle class or above neighborhood, but I still have to drive 14, 15 miles, to me that's still significant. My choice is, well, I guess if I'm in a car, I can get home with it.
And not only does income matter because of owning a car, but you very likely have more time and more resources available to you to access healthy food, to make healthy choices. Yeah. Yes.
You showed a map earlier, and it was this largely purpled area.
Right.
Was that low income? All of that
Yeah.
was low
The
income?
definition, yes. In order to be a food desert, you are low income, and the USDA's metric is, I believe, less than 85% of the region's median income. But like anything, how people live really is the definition of whether or not they have access. The USDA food desert definition is important because it lets us objectively look at different neighborhoods and compare them. But what's far more important is what people's experiences actually are. And even if they're within 10 miles of a grocery store in a rural area, if they can't get to that store, they still are an underserved community.
And there are no grants for low income families to receive healthy foods, right?
Well, there's SNAP,
WIC.
and
But,
right.
Food stamps doesn't define, this is just for healthy foods. They can buy
That's
whatever they
true.
want to with that.
And that's an important policy issue that we could impact, right?
WIC is the only thing, because I've been on WIC, but WIC to me doesn't provide enough choices for healthy foods. You get so much of vegetables and fruit, but it's not enough for a family of 2 or 3. You know,
And that is an important story to share. And it's important if you want to impact that policy, because a lot of those policies are set at the federal level. But when you have a coalition like Healthy Savannah that can all act with one voice and reach out to our representatives in the federal government and say, WIC should have more healthy choices. And SNAP should promote healthy choices because it does, and it's gotten worse, right? It's gotten worse over the last couple of years, what you can buy with SNAP. And that's a policy impact that directly influences how people eat. So you can have huge impact by changing that policy. And I think that's a good seed for a campaign. And your story is an important story in that. So, yes.
When you talk about increasing density as one of our goals, and obviously adding sidewalks and stuff like that, how does that play into, like, when we think about, you know, Florence now coming to hit these really dense areas that have a lot of concrete, and so they're very walkable, but they're not sustainable for the way our environment change is happening, because then you can quickly destroy a whole area too. So are we looking at that at all in terms of drainage and
Yes.
what we can do instead of just concrete sidewalks?
And not only the concrete sidewalks, but the overall development pattern. What we know is that by creating small nodes or villages of more dense development, you actually end up preserving more green space. And that green space can be our wetlands and our natural barriers to flooding and things like that. So the more our in-town neighborhoods and our uplands can accommodate mixed use and more dense development, the more as a community we'll be able to sustain the increased frequency of storms and severity of storms. But we also know that there are best practices. Like this morning, I was jogging and this landscaper was blowing leaves into the street, and it just drives me crazy to see that because I'm a civil engineer and I think about stormwater, and we're getting ready to have a storm come through, and he's blowing those leaves into the street right next to the storm drain, and all they're going to do is clog that storm drain. And so his customer that he's trying to help potentially could have a flooded front yard, and their neighbors could have flooded front yards. So they're important. You're right on target that you have to think about those systematic impacts. But we do know that because we've researched AARP, the American Association of Retired Persons, the Center for Disease Control, other groups like the Congress for New Urbanism and the Urban Land Institute, the American Planning Association, the American Public Health Association, they're all very common in terms of what land use recommendations they make to promote healthy living. And those are the recommendations that we're bringing to the table when we talk to the city staff and elected officials and say, these are best practices that have been shown to create more healthy neighborhoods, while at the same time saving that green space that's so important to stormwater management, and also recreation, and air quality and other things.
I think it would help to maybe add that as a part of the talking points, because it's top of mind for people. And sometimes that's like what you get afraid of when you think about if we consolidate everyone in this area. You can do that correctly, but you have to keep these green spaces.
Yes. Good, thank you for that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have one more question. There used to be something called Meals on Wheels, I guess, for senior citizens. Is there any way, like, Healthy Savannah could implement, I know you can't get to every community in one day, but, like, at least a few areas that might have more children that are obese or whatever, that you can give them, like, maybe packages of fruit, fresh fruit and vegetables? Is there any way that Healthy Savannah can implement that, or will we have to have a policy for that specific thing?
We do. One of our coalition members from the very beginning is the Foresight Farmers Market, and they have a mobile farmers market called Farm Truck 912 that does exactly that. West Broad Y has also been very interested in creating a mobile farmers market, and no question, there's a need for more of that. No question. I write grants pretty regularly for the farmers market to promote that mobile market in particular, and that's something we can and should do more of. And if you're interested in that, I know they would love to have you. And it is. So it's such an important.
The statistics is crazy. 1 in 4 children are obese already, and I mean, there's a lot of kids growing rapidly in Savannah, and the fact that their health is already at stake because it's a fast food restaurant on almost every corner. They come home from school, they might not get a cooked meal. They might not have fruits and vegetables to eat. So it's is causing more health problems in the long run, looking overall.
Before we take another question, I want to check on time. Y'all had other things on the agenda. Do we need to?
I think, we're right in our schedule right now.
Okay.
We could do the, if we think we're ready, we could go to the engagement activity. Or if you wanted to take one or two more questions. Or the questions are really terrific. We can also, we'd also like to walk away with any questions that we don't have a chance to answer here, so that we can put our thoughts together and maybe send out email response to the questions. What do you think, Whitney?
Yeah, why don't we take a couple more, and then if you have one that we don't get to, write it down, and we'll make sure to respond. And then you have the activity. Okay, I saw your hand's been up a while, I think.
I have one that might be a new program. It may seem like a small problem compared to some of the others, but this affects me personally. It's with my granddaughter. My granddaughter attends school in Chatham County, and she goes to prime time after school because they need childcare. So prime time has started serving dinner now. They call it dinner, and they serve it, I believe, between 4:30 and 4:45. And so they're serving these kids dinner, which I understand if you're a low-income child that maybe is not going to get anything for dinner, that might be a good thing. But for my granddaughter, if she eats at that time of day, when she gets home and I serve her a healthy dinner, she's going to go, I'm not hungry.
Yeah.
And if they were serving healthy food at that slot, I wouldn't be bothered by it. But of course, because of, I'm sure it has something to do with funding and everything, I'm not sure where that money is coming from to provide that food. But they're doing quick things. So they're doing a lot of, microwave things and a lot of chips and things. And I think if some way we could advocate for them to look at some healthier alternatives.
Yes.
And maybe let some kids view that as like a snack, or more food provided for those that feel they need it.
Right.
But, that's preventing her from eating a healthy meal, or if it's something real appealing that I have that evening, it's causing her to overeat. So.
And that's another great example of a way that a policy can promote a healthy choice, because as an example, Healthy Savannah partnered with the school system to create their wellness policies, and those wellness policies address things like that. Now, Prime Time is run by the YMCA, and Rhonda, you may know, I don't know who cooks their food.
Yeah, I was going to say when you finish answering, because I know one person here, so I didn't want to interrupt the order, but I did want to speak to that. I'm Rhonda Barlow, and I'm one of the school nutrition coordinators with Chatham Public Schools. So that's why I was going to speak. But I can wait my turn. Okay. Just as a, so she can have a better understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, and when you do understand why these things are happening, then we could potentially impact a change there. And there was a hand up here. What was there?
My question is like when you were saying like the one that kids are obese, but a lot of it has to come with the parents. Because when I was growing up, we used to love going outside doing things. Now they got tablets. The technology is so advanced that they don't have to go outside anyway. They can sit in front of like a video game and talk to people in a whole other state or another. And a lot of it has to do with the parents not being like, hey, turn that off, go outside and play. They don't make them do physical activity as long as they're not bothering them or doing something that they're not in their hair. They don't really care. So it has to do with eating, yes, of course, but also they have to get the physical activity. The parent has to make them do. Like, they have to go outside, have some kind of run around activity. Because see, I heard one time they trying to take recess out of school. Right? Like, the kid has to, for one, a child is not going to sit in class in school for 6, 7, 8 hours and not want to do something, get fidgety. And you want them to eat healthy, okay, well, let them play.
Yes.
Play is healthy, that's activity,
And that's that culture of health, having both sides. But also, I do want to make sure I emphasize that, of course, personal choice has a lot to do with our lifestyles and whether they're healthy or not. But the space that we work in, making the healthy choice the easy choice matters because people's choices really do depend upon the options available to them. So our role is to make sure there are healthy options. And then the broad coalition that is Healthy Savannah, offering education and programming and helping parents make healthier choices for their whole families, that's the piece that then comes in behind the policy to make that, help that cultural shift happen. And it really is, all of those pieces are important, no question about that.
The questions are just wonderful, and the discussions around that, we want to continue that kind of communication. But in the interest of time today, we should probably kind of move on to the next thing because we're kind of all here for a purpose to get personally engaged, hopefully. So if you do have questions, if you can find a piece of paper, there's some extra agendas around. Tear off a piece or something. If you'll write your question and leave it with us, we'll make sure it's addressed one way or another for the group as a whole. I think we have all of your email addresses. But what we want to focus on as we kind of roll to the end of our program today is Whitney talked a little bit about how can we, as interested people in Healthy Savannah and what Healthy Savannah is doing, what can we on a personal basis do around that based on what we learned and heard today, the resources that are available to us, and what can we do about that. So we have something to think about and perhaps to walk away from, a little sheet that just says, I will. So I'm going to pass these around to everyone, and Whitney probably has some things to say to kind of get us going as well. But maybe talk amongst ourselves with the people that we're sitting next to or other in the room, and think about what each of us can do ourselves individually as part of this coalition to help make some get involved in the change for a healthy environment here. Do you want to add anything to that, Whitney?
Well, I was just going to see if I could find the slide. The spectrum of things you could do. And
we also, I think it would be important for Rhonda to now just say what her response is regarding prime time, which would be good for everybody to hear. And I'll just say, while I've got the floor, is that we do want to do a group photo up in front before we all walk away from here. So once we're done, then up to the front for a photo. I know everybody loves it.
I was just going to get it afterwards. Okay. For prime time, Whitney is right. That is with the meal. Two things are going on this school year with prime time. Excuse me. They started last year with some of the schools, and now they've expanded, and their goal is to get it in all the prime time sites where they get the meal from Second Harvest. From what I have, that meal being provided is provided through a grant funding with YMCA. And the meals that I have seen, they are a full-blown meal. It is potatoes, it is it's a meat, and it's a vegetable. I mean, it's a full meal. Along with that meal, they're also given a snack that is provided through our department. We contract with the YMCA, and this is ever since, I don't know, this has been several years that we have contracted with them to provide snacks. And so they are getting, some sites, and I want to say most sites now, they're getting a meal and a snack. And you are so right. They're being, on a certain level, they are being overfed. Because
some kids are. I feel like their kids need it.
Some. Because you're right, when you pick them up and they go home, either they're not eating at home because they're full, because they were hungry because the last time they ate lunch was 12 o'clock and now it's 4 o'clock and they're hungry. And so, so they're either not eating at home or they're eating at 4 and then they're eating again at home because that's just what they do. Some kids, they're going to eat when you put food in front of them, that's just what it is. And so from what I have seen of the meals, they are meeting someone's nutritional guidelines because it's real food. And so I don't really know what to say concerning that, past maybe you want to have a conversation with YMCA. I don't think it's necessarily going to help, because I'm suspecting they're providing those meals because you do have a lot of children who don't get the meal when they get home. So on the balance of things, I think that's where they're coming from.
I definitely don't want them to not provide it.
Right, and I think it's just it may just be a conversation, but you don't necessarily want to isolate your child. So I don't know, it's just something that you're going to have to negotiate. And what I have seen is that because our snacks are just what they are, they're a snack, it's usually a good complement to what they're getting. So if you were to sit down and look at the snack and then you look at the meal, it is a full, complete meal. And the child, if they eat it, they should be full. Some are eating it and some are not. So you do have two different organizations providing food for the kids at that time of day. So, but it is real food, and it is a nutritionally balanced meal, the ones I have seen. And I'm sure that's how they are every day. And for your WIC question, WIC provides food just for that person. It's not designed to provide the vegetables for more than just that person. That's why they only get a certain amount of vegetables and juice. Too much milk, but that's another discussion.
Right, too much milk.
Yeah.
You can give me a whole bunch of milk, but you can't give me a whole bunch of
And I used to work for
vegetables.
WIC for years. That's how I know. Before I came to School of Nutrition, I was working in WIC. And the milk that WIC is providing is based off of guidelines from USDA. And USDA is heavily lobbied by the milk industry. So if you follow the money, you will see why they're putting that amount on the voucher. And with the fruits and vegetables, that was a hard policy fight. That was a fight for years and years and years and years. That, WIC advocates, we had to really fight for that. And I was working in WIC while that was going on. So, but it is just for the mom who's breastfeeding.
Right.
And yeah,
it's like when you apply for WIC, it's women, infant, children. That person might have more than one child. That person might be pregnant with more than one child. So,
yes, and then so what you do is you apply for WIC for that child that's under 5. If you really were to look at it, it's for 5 and lower. No, it's for 4, because once they turn 5, they're off. So it's for 4 years old and younger. And so each one of those have their own vouchers, and that's how you can get too much food in your house, because it's for that person. But it really is for that person.
So I think we can see that there's a real need for information out there, and a real need for advocacy and policy. There's plenty of work to be done. So did you want to say something about this slide? Or,
Well, I just put it back up so that people could think about the range of ways they might be able to engage.
So let's take a moment now and kind of pull it back to us personally, because when we leave the room here, it's up to boots on the ground, people here that are the ones that make the change. So let's just take a couple of minutes, 3 minutes or so, and maybe put some thoughts down, chat with your neighbor next to you, get some thoughts down, and then if anyone is wanting to share or would like to share what their idea might be for how they can move forward with this, we'll ask for that. But we're kind of rolling to the end here, so let's just take a couple of minutes and go ahead and do that.
So I am, you come out of this There's my house right here on the corner. That's my house. I'm running in front of the white ones. I probably should tell them. My kids, before they know that subdivision,
once the breakfast.
Yes, I heard a lot of things about when you said
So now that
well, it's a lot of houses. They put a subdivision in there, and actually, all of that used to be looking all about. So they tried to burn it. So on this property that you bring there are three.
I'm sure you could. What time?
Just across the street. Those houses. That's what I'm saying. So I just so happen to
So this is your 1 minute warning. Make some commitments. In writing, no pressure. In blood.
Okay, so that is very big subdivision. It says I've been here about 10 years. It is like you see the they still work here, but they don't, they're kids and chatting schools. So
Okay, if I could bring everyone back together, we've just got a couple minutes left. You can finish your conversation. Aha, time's up. Patty says. Now what we'd like to do is just share as a group.
So, this is terrific. You're all off on a tear here, but let's kind of close together as a group once again, and we'll kind of finish it up here.
So we'd like to hear a little bit about what you guys are thinking about, and what you've written down, or what you didn't get a chance to write down, but that you're excited about. Anyone want to volunteer to share what they will do?
Here's one.
Oh, I took it back.
No, you haven't talked yet. I'm picking on you. Tell us what you're interested in.
What we were talking about. I don't know what to do about it, but I was saying what we were talking about.
Oh.
We were talking about like the apartment complexes and stuff, and how like even like the ones that we live in right now, like they're so dangerous for anybody and everybody to walk around. So all of the families that live in those 3 and 4 bedroom apartments, like they have nothing to do except for like run out into the streets.
So what determines how those apartment complexes are built, the pattern that they're built in, is the zoning ordinance that I was talking about. Mm-hmm. So what you can do to change that is get involved in the zoning ordinance that's being drafted today. I didn't get into this detail, but draft 5 of the city's zoning ordinance proposal just came out last week. If you go to NewZo, which is short for New Zoning Ordinance, so NEWZO.org. I know you're not going to go read the zoning ordinance. I've read it several times, several different iterations. It's tough. But if that's what you're interested in, then now is a perfect time to impact that, because there is a draft available for public comment. And I'm happy to work with you specifically on some changes that could shape how apartment complexes are built.
So that's a great idea to send an email to policy@healthysavannah.org, and that gets to Whitney, so she can give some more feedback on what specifically to do, an individual can do to impact that. Anybody else want to share? And I will. Are you ready to dive in with the?
I will volunteer with Healthy Savannah in the future, and I will vote for representatives that care about the community.
Oh, that's wonderful. I want to know what your name is.
How where can they go? Who else wants to share? Who else will put out a voting guide so we will know who to vote for? Who supports healthy policies in our community?
Oh, wait.
Where to find that information? Because this last round, it was dry. It was dry. I'm thinking of the upcoming ones will be better for information out there to know what their track record is. But the last round was horribly dry. Even the League of Women Voters didn't have anything, and I was surprised.
That's an important point. Something we should think about for future activities. But I don't have an answer. I don't know.
Okay.
Someone else? Yes, ma'am.
I'm new to the area. This is my second year in the Savannah area. And so I need to, for myself, educate myself on who the policymakers are, who I should be voting for in November, and how they care or don't care about food and activity levels.
Carolyn, what about you? You're engaged on so many levels. I'm curious.
I got stuck in a rut when you were talking about the way that public housing is designed and built. I just saw fronts of the buildings facing each other kind of in a circle to create more community among the people. I just thought that'd be a great idea. That's not something I can do. But I got stuck right there and just.
But there is something you can do because the Housing Authority is one of our partners, and we've been talking to them a lot about creating more diverse housing types, more scattered sites, and mixed use developments so that they do have things like grocery stores even next door to public housing projects.
Yeah. Well, there was one time, but it fell apart.
That's what I asked.
A lot of disinvestment,
How can I help in that regard, they having more healthy stores in the neighborhood, how can I help? Because another thing is, I don't know, and I have to be very honest, sometimes I'm very shy about my English, so I don't know if I'm okay with what I use, how I'm going to express, and that concerns me sometimes. I like helping, but sometimes I get a little shy when it comes, to express myself with my English.
So I think that's an important point, and I did want to just re-emphasize that one way you can help is by engaging your own network and finding out what's happening and who else is interested. But then the other thing is, all it takes is a phone call or an email to a decision maker to say, I support this. I'm your constituent, and I'm a parent, or not, whatever. When I write, I always say, I'm a constituent, I'm a small business owner, here's what I think. Because I'm not a parent, but if you are. So writing that email is important. And then sharing that with your network and saying, this is important to me, if it's also important to you, back me up on it. Because right now, there are some things happening which create a sense of urgency, for example, around the zoning ordinance and healthy food finance. But every year, the city passes a budget. And so commenting on what you think the city's priorities should be in terms of their funding is always relevant. And then, other campaigns might become more important or more time sensitive depending on what the political will is and what the city's working on at that point. But just sending an email can be very powerful. Sure.
I don't know if it's a question or it's a comment, but I'm not good at initiating things. But if you guys had something going on and you needed volunteers, I'm one of those people who's always, yeah. Like I can join a cause, I cannot start a cause. So when you say I will, it's like, yeah, count me out.
Maybe
And by the
what
way,
you
you
will
speak
do
good
is
English.
you will attend health fairs or community events or the farmers market and represent Healthy Savannah. That's an important role.
Okay.
Sometimes standing at a table and having a conversation with the people walking by and sharing the information we have, collecting survey responses, that's all important too. And to your point about not being as comfortable necessarily starting things, more and more we're trying to build in easy tools for you all to use. So right now there are two different ways. You don't even have to know who your elected officials are, but if you go to the website and walk through the pages that I showed you, and I can send you a direct link to this, but there's already an action page set up about healthy food finance. All you do is enter your address and it automatically sends it to your alderman if you live within the city. So, and we're working on building more tools like that so that to make it as easy as it can be. And of course, there's some language built in about the benefits of healthy food finance that you can edit and customize for yourself.
So I'll just interject at this point just to help share with everyone that we are out of time. So I'm sure you all have other things you need to do this afternoon. We're here if you'd like to come up and chat about anything in specific. We're available for additional questions. I want to thank you all so much for coming. I really, really appreciate the engagement with Healthy Savannah and the work that it's doing out in the community. So thank you so much for coming. Do please continue to read my emails and the other ones that come out. And if you wouldn't mind, just there's a garbage can in the back. If you have any trash left at your table, that would be great. If you need to give me your questions for us to respond to, please do that. And Paula wanted to take one last picture.
And let's get